prior to the war, there was only about 5 families left in Galt.
Why was this? What had happened to the others?
Well, most of the others had moved away. Some of them their families, or their children had gone to university, and perhaps they were getting older, and they moved away to the city where they had more Jewish, services and everything else, where we barely had enough to have services here. Without the families, with children, well, we couldn't hardly carry on because there weren't enough adults.
When did the community start to increase again?
The community started to increase right after the war was over, and were quite a number of younger people, perhaps just recently married or just got out of the service, started up businesses in Galt.
Do you think this was the decision to, or the reason why they decided to buy the shul just after the war?
That was the reason why, because we didn't have enough room to carry on services in the Springs house when there was the extra people that moved in, and some with children, but most of them that had children were lower than bar mitzvah age, you see. But then for about 2 years previous to 1947, there was a meeting held on the Preston Highway at one of the tea rooms, and the people that were in Galt got together, and they decided to see what they can do about obtaining premises to be used as a shul, whether we bought something or we built something. Because, as I say, at that time there could have been around close to 20 families.
Was the Springs house at that time, was that the one over where their yard is today? That one there?
Yes.
That was where the service
Yes.
was?
The old house on Beverly Street, 37 Beverly Street, and at the back entrance, and it was like below ground level, was where we used to use that one big room for our minions.
Who were the people who were, you might say, the instigators to trying to get the new premises?
Yes, there were many of them. One of the instigators, I remember, was the older members, including Mr. Spring, was strong for it to influence the younger members to buy a shul and a building for a shul. Originally, there was an offer put in for building, which was a store at the bottom and apartments on top, also on Beverly Street, almost across from where the Springs lived. But that deal fell through for some reason or other, and it wasn't until later, maybe a year or two later, that this property, which was the Bank of Commerce manager's home. It was owned by the bank, but the bank provided a home for the manager. And when this manager left, that lived in the house, I just forget the name of it. I do know the name, but it just slipped my memory now. So when he moved out, I believe Mr. Harry Spring, was the one that inquired about the property and influenced the rest of the members to buy this property because it was a good size with a big yard, and it was adaptable with by knocking out walls to make a shul out of it, and it would be big enough for the size of the community of the time, so there would be enough room.
Did anybody ever want to build a new building entirely?
Yes, the instigator of wanting to build a new building entirely or put an addition onto this building that we had bought in 1947 was Sam Kaufman, who originally came from Hamilton, and he worked for Canadian General Tower. He was a chemist, and later on he went into the plastics business for himself, and he did very well, and he started up this project of putting the extensions buildings onto the present building that we had, which was just a dwelling place with some walls knocked out. And it was through him, I would say mostly, that we enlarged the shul and put additions onto it and knocked out more walls and put in a kitchen which was kosher. We had the dairy on one side, cupboards, and the meat products, and dishes and everything. We kept two separate dishes and kept it strictly kosher in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm. When the original building was bought, was there any opposition amongst any members to buying the building at the time?
No, I don't believe there was any opposition to the buying of the building, and I believe at that time it was bought for around $7,000 or slightly over, and it was something that everybody contributed towards the buying and the paying it off.
Mm-hmm. Was Mr. Harry Adler involved in this one?
Mr. Harry Adler was also involved in this, yes.
Mm-hmm. How was he involved?
He was involved because he was one of our early presidents, because once we established the shul, so we also made up posts like president and vice president and secretary and treasurer and everything to run it properly. And out of the members, they were voted in who should be the president for each year. They changed the presidency, and different ones took on the job, as well as the other positions as well. And I think it was run fairly well.
How did the executive members decide how much each member was going to pay in terms of dues?
The dues to start off with was the estimated earnings of each person or family, and from that the amount of children that they had that would need teaching, and the ones with the higher incomes, and also the ones with the most children paid higher rates than the ones that could that had less children or no children at that time, because most of the newcomers were young married couples, and a lot of them didn't have family as yet. But it was estimated on their the supposedly earnings of the person or family. And if there was any objection to the assessment, we had a special meeting during the after the when the theater closed up from the summer. So we used to have a meeting before closing time, and there was usually about 5 men on the assessment committee that would listen to anybody that said they could not afford it or they refused to pay the amount that they were asked to pay for their dues for the following year.
Do you remember, were there many people who disputed the assessment usually, or did most people accept it?
There was usually about in the neighborhood of from 3 to 5 or 6 people that would come into these assessment meetings to try and reduce their assessment. Mm-hmm. And the committee used to decide whether they could or they couldn't. I might say that at one time I refused to pay what they were going to have me set up as, and I had to appear before this committee and state my reasons. And at that time I was refused, and I had to pay what I was assessed at. Mm-hmm. And as a rule, though, there was 5 or 6 of the members at least that would come and appeal their assessment.
Did anybody ever quit over it before?
There were people that quit. For a while, I myself quit not paying my dues, but I had to pay my dues, but I quit going to the meetings which we had each month or two, a general meeting. I quit going to them because I was peeved because I couldn't get my assessment reduced.